I was 15 years old when my brother sold me. Not on a street corner. Not in a dark room with men counting cash. It was much more civilized than that. It was at the airport, in the fluorescent brightness of the international terminal, with Tariq holding my hand and my new passport and a smile that looked exactly like the smiles of the other families saying goodbye to their children. "You'll love Pakistan," he said. "Grandmother is waiting. She'll teach you to cook the way Mom did. And the school there, it's better than anything here. You'll come back fluent. You'll come back grown." I believed him. He was my brother. He was 24, the man of the house since our parents died in the fire, the one who had held me while I screamed at the funeral, the one who had worked 2 jobs to keep us in the house, the one who had promised our mother on her deathbed that he would protect me. I was 14 when the fire took them. A gas leak in the restaurant they owned, the one that had paid for our house and my school, and the hope that we were building something permanent in this country. I woke up to sirens. I woke up to neighbors holding me back. I woke up to Tariq's face, pale and streaked with soot, telling me they were gone. For a year, we were orphans together. He cooked for me. He drove me to school. He sat in parent-teacher conferences and pretended he understood what the counselor was saying about my grades, my grief, my need for stability. He was all I had. And when he said Pakistan would be good for me, when he said I needed to connect with my roots, when he said the ticket was already bought and the family was waiting, I hugged him. I thanked him. I got on the plane. My name is Zara. I'm 40 years old. I'm the CEO of Cypher Shield, a cybersecurity firm in Austin, Texas, which means I spend my days protecting systems from people who want to break them. I have 4 to 3 employees. I have government contracts. I have a penthouse with a view of the Colorado River and a closet full of suits that cost more than Tariq sold me for. But I also have a file. Encrypted, triple back it up, accessible only through biometric verification. It contains every email, every transfer, every document that proves what my brother did. And I have a calendar reminder, set for every March 14th, that says simply, "He sold you. You survived. You build." This is not a story about forgiveness. This is a story about what happens when the person who should have been your fortress turns out to be the one selling the bricks. Welcome to Little Bunny Stories. If you're new here, my name is Zara, and this channel is where we tell the truth about the families who call it tradition when it's trafficking, who call it protection when it's profit. If this is your first time listening, hit that subscribe button. We post stories every week, real stories, hard stories, stories about women who stopped being grateful for their own sale. Here's my story. The family waiting for me in Lahore was not my grandmother's. That was the first lie. There was no grandmother. The woman who met me at the airport, a heavyset lady in a black shalwar camise who smelled of rose water and something sour, introduced herself as Auntie Farah, a friend of the family, and took me to a house in a neighborhood I didn't recognize. Not the old city where my parents had grown up, not the respectable suburb where my mother's sisters lived. A concrete house with bars on the windows, in a street where the men looked at me the way men look at furniture they're considering buying. I asked about school. Auntie Farah laughed. "School, Beta, you are school now. You will learn everything you need here." I didn't understand. Not that first night, when they locked my door from the outside. Not the second day when a man came to meet me, older, heavy, with hands that lingered on my shoulder while Auntie Farah watched and smiled. Not the third day when Tariq called and I cried into the phone that I wanted to come home, and he said, "Zara, be strong. This is for the family. This is what we do." "What do we do?" I asked. "What is this?" "This is your wedding," he said, and then he hung up. The man was Rashid, 35 years old, owner of an import business that seemed to consist mostly of warehouses and men with guns. The wedding happened 4 days after I arrived. Not legal, Tariq had made sure of that, had explained to me in our last phone call that American papers meant nothing here, that I was visiting, that the ceremony was cultural, but binding enough for the community, binding enough for Rashid, binding enough that when I tried to run, 2 weeks in, they brought me back and explained calmly what would happen if I tried again. Rashid didn't hit me, not at first. He didn't need to, he had other tools, the locked door, the language I barely spoke, the fact that I had no money, no identification, no proof that I existed. The fact that Tariq had taken my passport for safekeeping and had not, I now understood, any intention of returning it, and the fact that Tariq had been paid. I found out by accident. Rashid was careless with his paperwork, or perhaps he thought I was too stupid to read, too broken to understand. I was folding laundry in his office, one of my duties, along with cooking and cleaning and the other duties that came with being a wife, and a receipt fell from a file. $12,000. Dated the day before my flight. Paid to Tariq Rahman, Austin, Texas, purpose, consultation fee. I stared at the paper until my eyes burned. $12,000. That was what I cost. That was the price of my brother's protection. That was the value of my mother's last wish, converted to cash and deposited into an account I would never see. I didn't cry. I had learned not to cry in front of Rashid. Crying made him angry, made him remind me that I was ungrateful, that my family had abandoned me, that he was the only one who would have me now. Instead, I folded the receipt into the waistband of my shalwar, and I made a decision. I would not escape. Not yet. I would learn, I would become valuable, and then I would become dangerous. Rashid made me work in his business, not the legitimate parts, the import licenses, the customs forms, the meetings with suppliers, the shadow parts, the bookkeeping, the records that didn't match the official ones, the transfers to accounts in countries I had never heard of. He thought I was too uneducated to understand. He thought my American schooling had been wasted on a girl, that I could barely read Urdu, that the English I spoke was too colloquial for business. He was wrong. I had been a straight-A student. I had been taking AP classes. I had been planning to study computer science, to build things, to understand systems. And his business was a system. A flawed one. One with passwords written on sticky notes. One with security questions answered by information easily found on social media. One with a computer in the back office that Rashid never used, that he had bought for the accountant and then forgotten about, that sat connected to the internet with no firewall because Rashid didn't know what a firewall was. I started small. I learned the bookkeeping. I learned which accounts held what, which transfers were legitimate and which were not, which suppliers were real and which were fronts for other operations. I learned that Rashid was not just an importer, he was a broker. Of goods, yes, but also of other things. Documents, passports, and women. I found the files. Hidden in a folder labeled employee contracts which Rashid never checked because he trusted me to organize his papers. 23 files. 23 women, some older than me, some younger. All married to men in Pakistan, the Gulf, Europe. All with stories like mine, sent by brothers, uncles, fathers, for their own good, all with prices attached. The cheapest was $4,000. The most expensive was $18,000. I was number 17. My file was labeled ZR. USA $12K settled, like a debt, like a dispute, like an account closed. I copied everything. I didn't know how, not then, but I knew I needed proof. I used the forgotten computer. I created an email address, zararaman.1991, that no one would connect to me. I sent the files to myself, piece by piece over months, using a VPN I learned to install from a tech forum I found through a Google search Rashid didn't know I knew how to do. And I saved money. Not much, Rashid controlled everything but enough. A few rupees here, a few there, hidden in a jar of rice that I kept in the kitchen, that no one ever checked because who would hide money in rice? It took 3 years. 3 years of being settled. 3 years of learning to smile when Rashid touched me. 3 years of pretending gratitude, pretending submission, pretending that I had accepted my fate and was content to be his wife, his bookkeeper, his invisible property. And then, one night, I ran. Not dramatically, not with screaming or breaking windows. I simply walked out of the house while Rashid was at a meeting, while the guard was sleeping, while the night was dark enough to hide my shalwar camis. I took the money from the rice jar. I took a USB drive with the files. I took nothing else. I walked for 3 hours to the address I had memorized, the office of a women's NGO I had found online in one of my stolen moments on the forgotten computer. They were closed. I sat on their steps until morning. When they opened, I showed them the USB. I showed them my face. I showed them the empty space where my passport should have been. They didn't ask questions. They got me out. Through Karachi, through Dubai, through London, through 16 hours of fear that Rashid had found me, that Tariq was waiting, that I would be dragged back, and this time there would be no locked door, just a grave. I landed in Houston. I had no home, no money, no identification except a photocopy of my birth certificate that the NGO had obtained through channels I didn't understand. I was 18 years old. I had been sold, used, and discarded, and I was free. I didn't go to the police. Not about Tariq, not about Rashid. I told myself it was because I had no proof, because the marriage wasn't legal, because I was afraid of being deported, of being blamed, of being told that I had consented, that I had gone willingly, that $12,000 was a fair price for a sister's future. But the truth was simpler. I was ashamed. Ashamed that I had been stupid enough to trust Tariq. Ashamed that I had been weak enough to stay for 3 years. Ashamed that my own brother had looked at me and seen not a person but a transaction, and that I had not seen it in time to stop him. So I rebuilt, quietly, invisibly. I changed my name, legally, through a court in Harris County. From Zara Rahman to Zara Chen, my mother's maiden name, the name she had left behind when she married my father and came to America. I got a GED. I worked nights at a call center, days at a diner, weekends cleaning offices. I saved every dollar. I applied for scholarships. I got into the University of Texas, not for computer science. I couldn't afford the full program, but for information security, a field that was new enough to have funding, practical enough to get me a job, and close enough to my original dream to feel like I was still building something. I graduated at 26. I worked for a defense contractor. I learned to protect systems, to find vulnerabilities, to think like the people who wanted to break things. And I started building my own company at 30, in a garage in Austin, with 2 employees and a mission that I didn't put in the business plan: to protect women like me. Cypher Shield started as cybersecurity for small businesses. It grew because I was good, better than good, ruthless, precise, the kind of good that comes from having learned to survive by understanding systems better than the people who controlled them. We expanded into protection for activists, for journalists, for domestic violence shelters that needed their locations hidden from abusers who knew how to track phones and hack emails. I never spoke about my past, not to employees, not to investors, not to the occasional man I dated and inevitably left because I couldn't sleep with someone whose breathing I didn't trust. I built walls higher than Rashid's, stronger than Tariq's lies, and I lived inside them. And then, at 39, I saw my brother again. It was a business conference. Austin Tech Summit. I was a keynote speaker, talking about infrastructure vulnerabilities in supply chain software. I was wearing a suit that cost $2,000, standing on a stage with my company's logo behind me, and I looked out at the audience and there he was. 3rd row. Center aisle. 4 to 4 years old, heavier than I remembered, with a beard that was starting to gray and a watch that probably cost more than my first car. He was wearing a name tag, Tariq Rahman, CEO, Rahman Hospitality Group. Below it, in smaller print, building community through authentic cuisine. I didn't stumble. I didn't pause. I finished my speech. I answered questions. I shook hands with people who wanted to connect and synergize and all the other words that mean nothing. And then I went to the bathroom and I threw up until there was nothing left. He didn't recognize me, of course he didn't. I had changed my name, my hair, my posture, my voice. I was Zara Chen, cybersecurity CEO, not Zara Rahman, the little sister he had sold for $12,000 and a consultation fee. I was successful, I was powerful, I was invisible. I watched him for the rest of the conference. He was a speaker too, entrepreneurship and the American dream, which made me laugh in a way that frightened the intern standing next to me. He talked about family values. He talked about giving back to the community. He talked about his daughter, Amina, 16 years old, the light of my life, who wanted to study business and continue the family legacy. I found his company's website that night. Rahman Hospitality Group, 12 halal restaurants across Texas. A foundation for immigrant youth. Board memberships on 3 charities. Political donations, moderate, strategic, enough to get his picture taken with congressmen but not enough to attract scrutiny. And I found Amina's Instagram. Private, but not carefully private. 16 years old. Filtered photos of her father's restaurants. Captions about my hero and the hardest working man I know. A recent post from 2 weeks ago. A photo of her in a dress I recognized, expensive, traditional, the kind worn at engagement ceremonies with the caption, "Excited for the next chapter." Dubai bound. Airplane ring. I looked at that photo for a long time. I looked at the ring on her finger, too big for a 16-year-old, too formal for a school event. I looked at the man standing behind her in the photo, his hand on her shoulder, his smile the same smile he had worn at the airport when he sold me, and I started to dig. It took 6 months. I didn't do it myself. I had employees, contractors, people who were good at finding things without knowing why they were finding them. I built a case the way I built firewalls. Layer by layer, redundancy by redundancy, no single point of failure. Rahman Hospitality Group was a front. Not for bride trafficking. Tariq had learned his lesson there, or perhaps he had just found more profitable merchandise. The restaurants were real, successful even, but their real purpose was cash flow. Specifically, cash flow for a Mexican cartel that used Tariq's chain to launder money from Texas to Dubai, where it was converted into real estate and consulting fees, and the kind of wealth that doesn't appear on tax returns. The foundation was a shell. The political donations were protection. And Amina's engagement, I found the contract, buried in an encrypted file on a server in the Cayman Islands that one of my contractors accessed through a vulnerability I would have patched if I were Tariq's CTO, was not a marriage. It was collateral. The contract was with a man named Tariq al-Rashid, 51 years old, Dubai-based investor in Rahman Hospitality. The terms were explicit. In exchange for $2.3 million in expansion capital, Tariq would transfer custody and guardianship of his minor daughter Amina upon her 18th birthday. If Tariq defaulted on any payment, the transfer would happen immediately. Amina was not a bride. She was a guarantee. I sat in my penthouse, looking at the contract, and I felt something I hadn't felt in 20 years. Not anger, not grief. The cold, precise focus that had kept me alive in Rashid's house, that had taught me to hide money in rice jars and copy files in the dark. The focus of a woman who has nothing left to lose because she already lost everything and has spent 20 years building herself back from less than zero. I didn't go to the police. Not because I was afraid, but because the police would arrest Tariq, seize his assets, and Amina would end up in foster care or worse, deported to Pakistan, handed to family who would finish what Tariq started. The cartel would find another launderer. Tariq would find another guarantee, and Tariq would become a martyr, an immigrant entrepreneur persecuted by the system, his daughter's sale rewritten as cultural tradition that white America didn't understand. No, I needed something else. Something slower, something that would strip him of everything, his money, his reputation, his power, his ability to sell anyone ever again while keeping Amina safe. I needed to become his creditor. The financial attack took 4 months. I didn't buy his company. That would have been obvious, traceable, legally complicated. Instead, I bought his debts. Rahman Hospitality was leveraged. Tariq had expanded too fast, borrowed too much, promised too much to too many people. He had loans with 3 regional banks, 2 private equity firms, and a network of silent partners who were actually cartel money men demanding returns that the restaurants couldn't produce. I bought the loans. Not directly, through shell companies, through intermediaries, through the kind of financial architecture that I had learned to build, and more importantly, to hide. I paid pennies on the dollar for debt that Tariq thought was held by institutions that would restructure, negotiate, give him time. They didn't restructure, they didn't negotiate, they called the notes. All of them, within 2 weeks of each other in a coordination so precise that Tariq must have thought he was being targeted by a conspiracy, which in a way he was. He tried to find new financing. He called his cartel contacts. He called Tariq. But Tariq had seen the financials. I made sure of that, through an anonymous concerned investor email that included selected documents. Tariq didn't invest in failures. Tariq collected collateral. And then, on a Tuesday in March, I made my move. The creditor meeting was held in a conference room at a downtown Austin hotel. Tariq had requested it, desperately, trying to negotiate a stay, a restructuring, anything that would keep his empire from collapsing. He didn't know that the majority creditor, the one holding 67% of his outstanding debt, had agreed to attend. He didn't know it was me. I walked in at 10 a.m., wearing a navy suit and the pearls my mother had worn in her wedding photo, the pearls Eleanor had borrowed, the pearls I had recovered from a pawn shop in Houston 5 years after I escaped, the pearls that had become my armor. I sat at the head of the table. I placed my briefcase on the table. I opened it, and I looked at my brother. He didn't recognize me at first. He was too focused on his own panic, on the spreadsheets in front of him, on the desperate calculations of a man watching his life unravel. But when I spoke, his head snapped up. "Good morning, Mr. Rahman," I said. My voice was steady. It was the voice I used in boardrooms, in negotiations, in the moments when I needed people to understand that I was not asking. "I'm Zara Chen. I'm the majority creditor of Rahman Hospitality Group. And before we discuss your restructuring proposal, I have a personal matter to address." Tariq's face went through several colors: confusion, recognition, disbelief, and finally, the gray-white of a man who has just realized that the ghost he thought he buried is sitting across from him with a portfolio of his destruction. "Zara," he whispered. "That's not, you can't be, I can be," I said. "I am. And I have some documents I'd like to share with the group." I distributed folders. Not to everyone, just to the 3 other creditors present, the ones who didn't know me, who thought this was a standard meeting. The folders contained selected documents: the cartel transfers, the Cayman server, the contract with Farouk al-Rashid, and on the last page a photograph, Amina, 16, in her engagement dress with the caption from her Instagram. These documents, I continued, show that Mr. Rahman's business is not merely insolvent. It is a criminal enterprise, money laundering, fraud, and the trafficking of a minor, his own daughter, as collateral for a debt to a foreign national with known criminal associations. The room was silent. Tariq was standing now, his chair knocked over, his face purple. "This is a lie," he shouted. She's my sister, she's crazy, she ran away, she's been trying to destroy me for years, I ran away," I said, my voice still steady, still calm, still the voice of a woman who had learned to control every breath because uncontrolled breathing got you hit. "From a man named Rashid, in Lahore, who bought me from you for $12,000. I have the receipt, Tariq, would you like to see it?" I pulled it from my briefcase. The original, preserved in laminate, the paper yellowed but the numbers clear. $12,000. Tariq Rahman. Consultation fee. Tariq sat down. Hard, the chair wasn't there and he hit the floor, but he didn't seem to notice. He just looked at me and I saw something in his eyes that I had waited 20 years to see. Not guilt. Not remorse. Fear. The same fear I had felt in the back of that car in Lahore, in Rashid's house, in every moment when I understood that I was property and the person who should have protected me was the one who had priced me. "I have an offer," I said. "Not for the company. The company is finished. I've already filed the paperwork to liquidate. This offer is for you, Tariq." I slid a single sheet of paper across the table. A confession. Not legal, not binding, just a statement, written, signed, recorded, admitting what he had done to me, what he had planned for Amina, what his business really was. In exchange, I would not turn the documents over to the DEA. I would not contact Farouk. I would not expose Amina to the media or the foster system. He could walk away, free, with nothing, but free. "You have 5 minutes," I said. He signed in 3. I didn't release the confession immediately. I waited. I let Tariq believe for 7 to 2 hours that he had made a deal, that he had escaped, that his sister was still the soft, grateful girl who had hugged him at the airport. And then I released it. Strategically. To the Pakistani community centers in Houston and Dallas. To the donors of his foundation. To the charities where he sat on boards. To Amina's school. To the mothers of Amina's friends. To the congressmen who had taken his photos. I didn't make it viral. I didn't need to. I made it real. I made it permanent. I made it the first thing that appeared when anyone searched his name, his company, his legacy. The collapse was total. The restaurants closed within a week, the cartel pulled out, the health inspectors arrived. The employees quit when they learned what their boss had done. The foundation was dissolved. The political donations were returned, with statements of shock and disappointment. Tariq's wife, Amina's mother, filed for divorce and full custody, citing the confession, the contract with Farouk, the fact that her husband had planned to sell their daughter. Amina came to me. Not directly, she didn't know who I was, didn't know that the woman who met her at the shelter door was her aunt, her father's victim, the architect of his fall. She came through the Zara network, the foundation I had built quietly, invisibly, for women escaping exactly what she had almost become. I was there when she arrived. I opened the door. I looked at her, 16, scared, angry, confused, wearing a hoodie that was too big and eyes that were too old, and I saw myself. Not the me in the suit, the CEO, the creditor. The me in the concrete house with bars on the windows. The me who had learned to hide money in rice jars. The me who had walked 3 hours to find help. "Welcome," I said. "You're safe here. No one can sell you. No one can trade you. No one can make you a guarantee. You're not property. You're not collateral. You're Zara." She looked at me, confused. "How do you know my name?" I smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a woman who had learned that warmth is a luxury you earn after survival. "I don't," I said. "Zara means princess. But here it means something else. Here it means the woman who walked out, the woman who built the door, the woman who came back to close it behind her." Amina nodded slowly. She didn't understand, not yet, but she would. I saw Tariq one last time, not by plan. I was walking through a construction site in East Austin, a new building for the Zara network, bigger, more secure, with biometric locks and Faraday cages and all the technology that I had learned to build to protect women from men like him. He was working there. Laborer, hard hat, calloused hands. He had lost 40 pounds. He had gained 40 years. He saw me. He stopped. He didn't speak. I didn't speak. We stood there 20 feet apart with the noise of construction between us, and I looked at him and I felt nothing. Not hate, not pity, not the satisfaction I had imagined for 20 years. Just the absence of feeling, the empty space where a brother should have been. Why? He asked finally. His voice was rough, unused to speaking to anyone who mattered. Why didn't I turn you in? I asked. Why didn't I let the police take you, the cartel kill you, the system deport you? He nodded. Because prison makes you a martyr, I said. Because death makes you a victim. Because the worst thing I can do to you is let you live really live with what you are. A seller, a traitor, a man who looked at his sister and his daughter and saw inventory. I turned to leave. He grabbed my arm. His grip was weak, desperate, the grip of a man who has nothing left to hold. I was trying to protect you, he said. In Pakistan, you would have been safe, married, provided for. I was trying to give you what Mom wanted. I pulled my arm free. I looked at his hand, the hand that had held mine at our parents' funeral, the hand that had taken $12,000 for my future, the hand that had planned to sell his daughter to a man twice her age. Mom wanted me to be free, I said. You wanted me to be profitable. There's a difference. And you knew it. You knew it when you took the money. You knew it when you locked the door. You knew it every time you called and told me to be grateful. I walked away. I didn't look back. I had spent 20 years learning not to look back. I'm Zara. I'm 41 years old. I'm sitting in the office of the Zara Network's new building, looking at a screen that shows me a map of the world. Red dots. Each one is a brother like Tariq, an uncle like Rashid, a system like the one that sold me, that tried to sell Amina, that is still selling girls in concrete houses with bars on the windows. But there are green dots too, shelters, networks, women who escaped, women who built, women who came back. Amina is in college now. She doesn't know I'm her aunt. She thinks I'm just the founder, the woman who built the door. She studies computer science. She wants to work for Cypher Shield. She wants to protect people who can't protect themselves. I smile when she says that. I smile because she doesn't know that she's protecting herself, that the code she writes, the systems she builds, the firewalls she designs, they're all doors. Doors that close behind her. Doors that keep out the men who see girls as inventory. Doors that I built, brick by brick, rice jar by rice jar, from a concrete house in Lahore to a penthouse in Austin to this office where I sit, watching the dots, waiting for the next girl to walk through. If you're listening to this and someone sold you your body, your future, your trust, your name, I want you to know, the price they got was not your value. It was their poverty, their smallness, their inability to see you as anything but a transaction. You are not the receipt, you are not the contract, you are not the guarantee, you are the creditor, you are the architect. You are the woman who builds the door, walks through it, and comes back to close it behind her. See you in the next story.